You're watching Saturday Anime on the Sci-Fi Channel.
Hey now, this is Reverend Paul, and since this is the Anime Sex YouTube channel, I figure we should keep the party going and get right back into our discussion about the Angel of Darkness series. But before we do that, I just wanted to mention I've been doing Fan Art Fridays, and every Friday I've been posting new fan art. I posted some prison school fan art, I did some fan art of Day and Asuka in a very awkward moment, I did some fan art of Armika putting Guy in a sharpshooter because why the hell not? I took a break from uploading fan art just like I took a break from uploading videos, but if you would like to see the artwork that I will be posting, please make sure to follow me on Blue Sky or Threads or Instagram or Twitter or whatever you got. So anyway, let's get rambling, shall we? Angel of Darkness 3, Nihon no Nawa Inju Kyoshi-san, was released in 1994 with Kanenari Tokiwa returning as director and this time being joined, however, by Kazuma Mudaki. Kazuma Mudaki worked as an art director on the Day Day hentai, which is a very cool hentai OVA with some cool artwork. Day Day should also not be confused with Day D, which is the J-idol group that have like kind of R&B influences, which is, you know, pretty cool. I totally recommend. So Angel of Darkness 3 begins with this chick, Hideomi, and Hideomi is in the remnants of Professor Shimazaki's secret lab, which also may or may not be Professor Goda's anime sex dungeon. And while Hideomi is in this secret lab, she is pleasuring herself in front of this weird looking sphere. And the reason she's doing this is because she wants one of the teachers at this school, Mr. Kawamuda, to fall in love with her. And Hideomi is so desperate for this, she is willing to do anything. And she lets this weird looking black sphere know this by rubbing all of her vaginal juices all over it. It's an Angel of Darkness movie, so it's always going to come back to that. So the vaginal secretions start dripping, and then they kind of like awaken something in this weird room, and then this pentagram forms. Then we see this ghostly visage of Professor Shimazaki, which completely freaks out poor Hideomi. Now, after Hideomi does that, she awakens some weird magical force, and she is seen later on the upper floor of the school wearing some kind of weird black pearl pendant, and she's looking out at the students that are currently arriving. Out there, she sees Minako, and Minako is like a really popular chick who's really good at tennis. Everybody is really impressed with Minako. She has this really cool hair. Another person who's really impressed with Minako is Mr. Kawamuda, the person that Hideomi is obsessed with. Now, Hideomi lets the pendant know the person she is looking at is in fact Mr. Kawamuda, and her wish is to make him love her. Then she's kind of overwhelmed and she passes out, and she starts to remember why she became obsessed with Kawamuda. And the reason is because Kawamuda took Hideomi's virginity, and Hideomi became kind of attached to him. Now, when Hideomi wakes up, she is in the nurse's office, and she is being watched over by Miss Mamiya, who I guess is like the nurse here. In this anime, they don't really make their jobs too clear. I mean, I guess we'll have to assume Miss Mamiya is the nurse. I don't know what Mr. Kawamuda is the teacher of. Maybe he's the tennis teacher. I have no fucking clue. So Miss Mamiya is very concerned about Hideomi, and she's asking Hideomi if she's going to be okay, if she needs any help. And Hideomi is like, I'm totally fine. You don't need to like do anything for me. And Miss Mamiya is like, I'll make you some warm milk and that'll make you feel better. And Hideomi is like, okay, I guess that's all right. Now, honestly, the first problem I see right here is the fact that Hideomi is willing to drink warm milk, which, you know, let's be honest, the only people who drink warm milk are nerds. This is all starting to make sense now. The reason, Hideomi, Mr. Kawamuda is losing interest in you is because you're a nerd. And as we all know, it's not okay to be a nerd. Nerds are terrible people. Ogre had no choice but to chuck that dude off that roof. He had to protect the fraternity from the terrible nerd. So as Hideomi is sitting there waiting for her really gross warm milk, Mr. Kawamuda walks in holding Minako because Minako has suffered an injury from a tennis match. And Mr. Kawamuda lies Minako down, and Hideomi looks on. She sees Mr. Kawamuda embrace Hideomi with his big, strong arms, and this really bothers Hideomi, and she gets very upset because she could totally tell Minako and Kawamuda have some kind of chemistry going on because they're very touchy-feely with each other, and this really upsets Hideomi, so she goes running out. And she drops the little black pendant tangent. Kawamuda and Minako and Miss Mamiya pay no attention to Hideomi as she runs out, and Miss Mamiya is watching Minako as she's got her hands all over Mr. Kawamuda, and she's like, I don't get why chicks are into dudes anyway. Then she was like, oh, I probably shouldn't have said that out loud. As Hideomi is running out, she is confronted by Etika and her gang of female guardians. They're basically just chicks who simp for Mr. Kawamuda. So Etika and her two henchmen, Megumi and Mayu, they take Hideomi and they bring her into the bathroom, and then they start taunting her, and it is pretty bad because Mayu whips out Hidomi's titties and Etika is like fondling Hideomi between the legs. Then they attack her with this goddamn dildo. Then she takes that dildo and shoves it in Hidomi's mouth. Then Etika shoves it between Hidomi's legs. This is all very inappropriate behavior. Students should not be treating each other like this. After Etika and her gruesome twosome are done having their way with Hideomi, they take pictures of her and tell her if Hideomi doesn't stay away from Mr. Kawamuda, they're going to release those pictures. So Hideomi once again wanders the hallway, very upset, and if things aren't bad enough, Hideomi hears Mr. Kawamuda and Minako fucking. It's really, really bad. Mr. Kawamuda, he's got his head between Minako's legs and he's like yodeling in the valley, and Minako's like, oh man, this is so awesome. And then Mr. Kawamuda whips out his junk and he's like, no, what would be awesome is if you like serviced me. And then Minako's like, oh man, I totally will. And Hideomi is hearing all of this, and she's had all she can stands and she cannot stands no more. How can you not feel bad for this poor girl? I mean, I know she's a nerd, but she has feelings, god damn it. So Hideomi runs downstairs to Professor Shimazaki's secret lab, which has become this kind of weird demonic lair. And now Hideomi is willing to do the final act of the ritual. This will enable her to finally make Mr. Kawamuda her love slave. So she takes off all of her clothes and she puts on a cape, which, as we've seen plenty of times before, is never a good sign. Suddenly, this giant wang comes out of the ground. Then Hideomi has to start servicing this bodiless wang, and then she eventually gets on top of it. And then Hitomi has to get it on with this wang and like repeat her wish in her mind. Suddenly, Hideomi gets lifted up, and then a bunch of tentacles come out and wrap around her, and then they consume her entire body, and that eventually leads to the reformation of Professor Shimazaki. And in one of his first acts in returning back to life, Professor Shimazaki makes sure he gets a mouthful of Hidomi's titties. So Etika, Mayu, and Megumi, they go back into the school, and they notice that somebody has completely trashed their umbrellas. Then Hideomi comes out and is like, hey, you stupid bitches, I completely fucked up your umbrellas. What do you think about that? And Etika's like, man, that's really fucked up. We're gonna kick your ass now, you damn nerd. And then Hideomi's like, well, you gotta come catch me. And then Hideomi starts running, and she runs down into Professor Shimazaki's secret lab, and Etika and her two hench chicks follow her. So Etika is like, okay, Hideomi, we have you cornered, and now you need to prepare yourself for like the most major ass kicking you have ever gotten in your life. And Hideomi is like, you stupid fuck, I didn't run down here to hide from you. I lured you down here to enact my revenge. Suddenly, Megumi is attacked by tentacles. Then Mayu is attacked by tentacles as well. Then Professor Shimazaki appears and he takes hold of Etika. And Etika is like, please, Heromi, don't hurt us. You should be nice and like things like that and stuff. And then Hideomi's like, bitch, those are the same words I said to you and you didn't give a fuck and you did fucked up things to me. So I'm gonna do even more fucked up things to you. Professor Shimazaki, proceed with the fuck uppery. So the tentacles rip off Megumi and Mayu's clothes. And I must say, at the risk of sounding like a complete pig right now, Megumi's got some pretty nice jugs right there. We need more of this. Why couldn't Megumi be a main character? So these tentacles are wrapping around Megumi's giant jugs, and they're wrapping around Mayu's body, and Professor Shimazaki is licking Etika. Then, if that's not bad enough, these tentacles turn into hands. And now these chicks are being groped by these disembodied hands. Look, I think Megumi's giant boobs forced this evolution of the tentacles, because Megumi's boobs are so giant, there is no way a normal tentacle can get a hold of them. You need a human hand. Then Professor Shimazaki throws Etika down, and then his tentacles come out. Then his tentacle penises merge together into what I can only describe as some kind of super penis. Then Professor Shimazaki attacks Etika with that very super penis. After Professor Shimazaki is finished having his way with Etika and her gang are subdued, and Hideomi starts to drip candle wax on Etika's boobs, and Etika's like, Hideomi, please leave us alone. And Hideomi's like, you stupid bitch, my revenge is like only just begun. And then Shimazaki's like, you wanna know what? Hideomi seems to have these things under control. I'm gonna gonna like skedaddle and like find my own action. So Professor Shimazaki is wandering the halls of this creepy school looking for a potential victim, and unfortunately Miss Mamiya is in the infirmary working late. So Professor Shimazaki very sneakily uses his Shang Tsung-like morphing abilities to turn himself into a copy of Hideomi. And Miss Mamiya sees Hideomi sitting on the bed, really upset, crying, and Miss Mamiya is like, oh my god, Hideomi, what the hell is going on? Why are you so upset? And Hideomi is like, Miss Mamiya, it's really fucked up. I was down in the weird secret laboratory we have in this school, and I was attacked by this weird dude. I don't know. I think his name was something like Professor Kawasaki, and he like violated me, and now I feel very devastated and I don't know what to do. And then Miss Mamiya is like, oh, Heromi, no, it's okay. Don't feel bad because a similar thing happened to me. And this to me is a very uncomfortable moment because Professor Shimazaki is sitting here playing a trick on this chick, and now she is confessing some real deep personal shit to him. And if I were him in that situation, I would not know how to react. Professor Shimazaki should be bringing this poor woman to a crisis center or something. But he's not going to do that because he's a horny sex demon. I guess it does explain why Miss Mamiya is not into dudes, and Bizarro Hideomi is like, Miss Mamiya, I am so sorry that happened to you. Please allow me to make you feel better by giving you some sweet midnight delight. So evil Hideomi and Miss Mamiya start to get it on. Evil Hideomi starts to lick behind Miss Mamiya's ears, and Miss Mamiya starts to lick Hideomi's armpits, which is like, you know, I guess everybody's got their own thing they're into. Then evil Hideomi starts licking between Miss Mamiya's legs. Then evil Hideomi frees Miss Mamiya's titties from that brazier prison, and she makes sure Miss Mamiya's titties get plenty of attention. And then evil Hideomi goes behind Miss Mamiya, and then her arm morphs into one of Professor Shimazaki's super penises, and she like shoves it inside Miss Mamiya, and she's like going to town and stuff. And then this super penis blows a load inside Miss Mamiya, which this cannot be good. Meanwhile, Hideomi is still torturing Erika. This has really gone way too far. I mean, I understand what they did to Hideomi was really screwed up, but Hideomi is crossing the line. So Hideomi is yelling at Erika, this is the camera that you took those terrible pictures of me with, and I'm just gonna take this stupid camera and smash it. So Hideomi throws the camera and it hits Professor Shimazaki's dark crystal, and Professor Shimazaki, while he's still in his weird Shang Tsung Hideomi form, is then like shocked by this and is like, oh man, what the fuck is going on? What is that crazy chick up to now? So Professor Shimazaki has to do that awkward thing where he's like lying in bed with the chick and he's like, bitch, I gotta get the fuck out of here. And he's awkwardly putting his pants back on because he's gotta go walk his ass down to this stupid lab to see what the hell this crazy chick is up to. And then when Shimazaki gets back down to the secret lab, Hideomi's like, where the hell were you, you lazy piece of crap? I have more revenge for you to help me with. And Professor Shimazaki's like, yeah, I guess. And Hideomi's like, hey, and don't get all bent out of shape with me too, because if it wasn't for me being all pissed off and hateful and wanting to beat the shit out of these evil chicks, you wouldn't even be here. And Professor Shimazaki's like, well, you want to know what? I want to argue with you, but yeah, you do have a point, so I guess I gotta be your slave. So Hideomi tells Shimazaki, now I want you to get that Minako chick, and I want you to bring her down here, because we need to like teach her a lesson too. Now after Mr. Kawamura and Minako have finished getting it on, Minako asks Mr. Kawamura, hey, you're not just hooking up with me because I have a rich family and you like want to get some cash or something. And Mr. Kawamura is like, no, that's totally not the reason. I'm only hooking up with you because I think you're hot and I'm like in love with you and stuff. And Minako is like, oh man, I totally believe you, dude. And I totally love you too, Mr. Kawamura. Now suddenly Professor Shimazaki appears and then he attacks these two with his many tentacle dicks. When we come back to Hideomi, we find that she has basically taken Erika, Megumi, and Mayu and has basically turned them into like a human altar, which visually looks very striking. It's reminiscent of the works of Hieronymus Bosch. The Erika candelabra would not look out of place in the Garden of Earthly Delights. So Professor Shimazaki brings Minako to Hideomi, and Hideomi is telling Minako, you're like a horrible person who has tempted the upstanding, handsome Mr. Kawamura, and in his good name, I need to like do horrible things to you. And Hideomi starts pulling on Minako's nipples, then she starts grabbing Minako's crotch, and it's at this point, it seems pretty clear that Hideomi has completely lost her mind. Because we can understand why she's taking revenge on Erika and her group of thugs, because she had a legitimate grievance there. Hideomi has no reason to interfere with Kawamura and Minako's relationship. This has nothing to do with her. Someone needs to speak up about this, goddammit. So Hideomi sicks Professor Shimazaki Shimazaki on Minako, and Professor Shimazaki starts licking Minako all over her body. Then he wraps her up in his tentacles. Then he does that full Nelson maneuver to Minako. And Hideomi is very impressed with the job Professor Shimazaki is doing in ravaging Minako. And she tells Professor Shimazaki, now is a good time to get Mr. Kawamuda and we could show him what a indecent person this Minako character is. And Professor Shimazaki's like, hey, I'm one step ahead of you. That Kawamuda dude is already here. And then Hideomi is like, well, where is he? And Professor Shimazaki's like, I've absorbed him into my body. When I first saw this, I was really impressed. Professor Shimazaki has learned his lesson from Angel of Darkness 2, where he left Kazuya alive. And now this time, he is not leaving someone alive unattended who could later foil his schemes. And he took influence from Freddy Krueger in the Dream Warriors and absorbed Kawamuda directly into his chest. But it turns out the reason Professor Shimazaki has absorbed Mr. Kawamuda is because this is what Professor Shimazaki needs to do in order to resurrect his full body. And then he tells Hideomi, once I absorb you, then I will be fully resurrected. But it won't be so bad because you two will be joined together in my body just like you always wanted. Then Hideomi is like, oh man, that's really fucked up. Then Professor Shimazaki attacks Hideomi with his tentacles. And Professor Shimazaki, he subdues Hideomi and then tells her, I will be able to absorb your body quicker after your friends get done with you first. And it is revealed all the chicks that Hideomi was taking her revenge on have now been mind controlled by Professor Shimazaki and they will do his bidding. And Hideomi is attacked by all 4 chicks and she is getting dogpiled. She's getting her whole body licked. People are licking her boobs. They're licking her armpits. Then she's got somebody's face in her crotch. Then she's got her crotch in somebody's face. Then at one point, they take Hideomi and they turn her completely upside down. It is a full-on all-girl orgy. And Professor Shimazaki looks on, very pleased with what he's accomplished. After being very frustrated in Angel of Darkness Part 2, in Angel of Darkness Part 3, he manages to score with every single chick. And now that the girls have all broken in Hideomi, she is ready for Professor Shimazaki's super penis. So Professor Shimazaki's sex slaves get Hideomi in prime position, and then Hideomi gets super penised. Elsewhere, Miss Mamiya is waking up from her little tryst with the evil Hideomi, and she's wondering where she is. And then as she's getting dressed, she noticed that Hideomi has dropped the little black pendant. So Miss Mamiya goes through the halls looking for Hideomi, and then she hears Hideomi screaming from the creepy secret lab that is part of the school. So Miss Mamiya goes down there and she sees Hideomi and she is being absorbed by Professor Shimazaki. And Miss Mamiya is like, what the fuck is going on? And Hideomi tells Miss Mamiya the whole story. I resurrected this evil sex demon to get revenge on those girls who were bullying me, and I wanted to make Mr. Kawamuda fall in love with me. But now this entire scheme has completely backfired on me. Can you please do something to help me? And then Hideomi remembers when she threw the camera at the black sphere and that hurt Professor Shimazaki. And Hideomi tells Miss Mamiya, destroy the black sphere and that'll totally stop this evil fuck. So Miss Mamiya goes running towards the sphere, but then Erika, Megumi, and Mayu stand in her way. So what she does is she throws the little pendant, and when it hits the sphere, it breaks the spell long enough to distract Professor Shimazaki's minions, and then Miss Mamiya runs closer to the sphere, but then Professor Shimazaki's tongue comes out and wraps around her neck. So then Miss Mamiya reaches and she reaches and she reaches and she finally gets to the black sphere and knocks it over, and then that stops Professor Shimazaki and all of his mind-controlled sex slaves. His body melts and Mr. Kawamuda and Hideomi are finally free, and Hideomi and Miss Mamiya embrace in an ending that is kind of reminiscent of Angel of Darkness 1. Now later on in the day, Miss Mamiya and Hideomi are getting it on once again. This crazy ordeal has brought them closer together and they're about to have some sexy time, and it is revealed that Professor Shimazaki's load has now turned Miss Mamiya into a sex demon. What I do like about Angel of Darkness 3 is that it's a story about revenge, and it's also a story about the corrupting power of revenge. It's kind of like a hentai monkey's paw story. Heromi is the victim of bullying and so desperately wants revenge, and then in the course of seeking that revenge, she becomes so cruel that she becomes even more of a monster than the people who are harassing her. And it is interesting too when we think about the ending of Angel of Darkness Part 3 and this whole idea of Professor Shimazaki infecting Miss Mamiya and then turning her into a demon. When you look at that idea, it almost makes the story about the cycle of abuse and how a person who is abused abused, if pushed in the right direction, can also become an abuser and will continue the cycle. The character designer for Angel of Darkness 2 was Yuji Ikeda, who was the art director on a lot of shonen anime like Dragon Ball Z and Naruto, and the character designer for Angel of Darkness Part 3 was Hideki Adaki, who was a key animator on Agent Aika and Steam Boy. And I feel like his art sensibilities work a lot better with Angel of Darkness. I think Adaki's character designs have a lot of personality. As I mentioned before, I really like Minako's hair, and what's interesting about Minako is that both her personality and her design reflect that she is the foil for Hideomi. And I really like the design of Hideomi too. She is convincing as this vulnerable, nerdy character and this kind of ruthless, sadistic character bent on revenge. I think her design conveys both emotions very, very well. Altogether, I feel like Angel of Darkness Part 3 is a big improvement over Angel of Darkness Part 2. It's by no means perfect. It has obvious problems, one of which being bad continuity. In the beginning, there's this very quick shot where Hideomi has the black pendant when she shouldn't even have it yet, but I think the story is more interesting, and I think the hentai scenes are more interesting, and it's totally worth checking out.